that was just such an amazing revelation that I had, and my life just totally changed. Hi, buddy.
Hey.
This week we are going to discuss a subject that is near and dear to my heart, both as a kid that grew up poor, but also as a modern day Christian, and that is the subject of poverty culture within the organization. Why is everybody broke? It's an ongoing joke that Jehovah's Witnesses are always either janitors or window washers, but it's a joke that has a lot of merit to it. So we're going to just kind of have a little discussion about that.
Right, and there is a slice of Jehovah's Witnesses who do very well. I knew a guy in Portland, Oregon, who was one of the top, if not maybe the top real estate broker. He was making great money, but even with him in the congregation, he was kind of looked down upon for doing that well and working that hard. And it's a weird focus they have on being absolutely strapped for cash at all times. It's strange, but I think we have the solution.
Very bizarre, and it's very different than almost all other mainstream Christian organizations. So we'll welcome your feedback at the end about why you think this might be. The number one thing we're going to cover is why are the majority of Jehovah's Witnesses living such simplistic lifestyles?
Right.
Number one is just programming. Like Jason said, there's this kind of unspoken belief that if you are well off, that you're automatically materialistic, or that you don't have your spiritual priorities in line. Like something is askew with you in your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the way that they present higher education, they're very critical of higher education, higher learning. The actual reason behind that is because they're afraid you're going to get out into the real world and develop your critical thinking, and you're going to hit the road. You're going to recognize the organization for what it is, a high control group, and you're going to want out. But they present it to members as, oh, well, higher education could distract you from your spiritual goals. It could be difficult for you emotionally, the stress, trying to balance your spiritual responsibilities and your higher education learning. But then also you're purposely exposing yourself to worldly influences, other students, teachers, things like that. So it just kind of gives you like a more negative taste in your mouth about pursuing higher education or something that could facilitate a higher salary or a better career. So right out of the gate, that's a no-no.
Yeah, it is a no-no, and I think greatly because they don't have the infrastructure to educate people to other types of vocations themselves. They don't have any trade schools even, and they definitely don't have any universities. So if you go to a university that's just a regular university, you're going to learn about stuff that makes you go, oh, that can't possibly be true, what Jehovah's Witnesses teach. And whereas people, organizations like Latter-day Saints, Mormons, they have thought ahead a little better. They have their own university. They go to Brigham Young University. Right. They learn how to be Mormons, and then they also learn how to be a dentist. They learn how to do other things, and that will make them money. And then, of course, the Mormons do a 10% tithe, so that money's all that money invested is coming right back. But the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, I think that the previous generation, actual generations, how generations work, not the Jehovah's Witness version of it.
Not
the previous generation, no, they don't overlap. The previous generation of governing body, I think they genuinely thought that the end was coming. And so they went ahead and said, okay, there's no need to set up an infrastructure like this, an educational infrastructure. We can just go ahead and tell everybody to keep it chill, work, jobs that don't require additional education. And also, to be clear, we're not putting down trades jobs. Those are amazing. They keep everybody running. We need electricians and plumbers, and those are skills. Those are awesome. And also you can make a real good living. But the organization pushes people down to the only work these very entry-level jobs, or start your own business and spend as little time as possible in the business and then focus on spiritual things. And a lot of the things that are emphasized is construction and building, construction, remodeling, learning how to do those kinds of things, because I think
Mhm.
the organization can use that, and it's far more profitable than sending somebody through dental school and then getting 10% of their revenue back. I think it's far more profitable to get free slave labor that comes in and builds you buildings and remodels fabulous apartments for their resale.
Right. Luxury townhouses. Um, yeah, it's always kind of been perplexing to me why they take this stance, because I think of, like you mentioned, like the Mormons and Brigham Young, and but I also think of like the Catholic Church and Notre Dame. I mean, it's every, maybe not every, but it's a common goal for a lot of like young Catholics when they're ready to start making college applications to attend Notre Dame. And of course, the church, like most mainstream churches, they do stress tithes and things like that. So it always perplexes me about why you would why you would not give your members every opportunity to be able to afford those tithes, or be able to, witnesses don't call it tithing, but they call it just donations, but
Right.
be able to afford those donations to make it a more attainable goal to pay in without taking food out of their mouths. But
Right.
as you said, it just teaches dependence on the organization.
And I think I mentioned
So
the Mormons specifically because they are a high control organization, whereas
yeah,
the Catholics don't really care if you believe in evolution, just as long as you show up on Easter. There's a lot. They're not as high control as that. But I take your
right.
point. It's a valid point. And other organizations, high control and not, have had the forethought to retain members and teach them how to make it a better living.
Yeah. The second thing that I think has to do with why the membership's financial development is stunted is they always portray the average working witness as greedy if they're trying to climb the ladder or like rise in the ranks of their job. They give, these testimonials about brother so and so, re-examined his work schedule and realized he could make cutbacks at work for the sake of, pursuing greater responsibilities within the congregation or promoting kingdom interests more. So they act as if you are in any way, I don't want to say power hungry, but like career driven or goal driven, that's bad,
Yeah,
or that
ambition's bad.
you're prideful in some way.
Mhm.
Um, and they constantly encourage members to perform self analysis. I heard that phrase all the time. Perform a self analysis. Examine your work schedule. You might think you can't pioneer, but maybe you could work part time instead of full time. I heard that all the time. And they never talk about, saving for the future. They never talk about a 401k or what you're going to need to retire, or, that you might like to be able to afford a vacation. Um,
Yeah.
they just act like, the end is going to happen at any second. So if you have any spare time, you better be investing it into the organization again, because that's what's going to save you, not that big paycheck.
Right. And I don't know the numbers because organizations like Jehovah's Witnesses don't have to be transparent about their numbers, their donations and such. But I don't. I was the account servant for quite some time, and let me tell you, the donations that were going from the congregation that I was in, that was not a poor congregation.
Mhm.
They were, I mean, not particularly like there was still everybody. There was one young woman who worked at the local burger joint, and she wrote her little $15 check. Is my point, but she lived with her
Yeah.
parents, and her parents helped her out, and it was certainly poor by normal standards, economic standard. Nobody was saving for retirement, save a couple people, but it was. in that congregation that was not especially poor, the amount of money going from donations to the organization wasn't overwhelming, except for the time when they
Right.
took over the congregation savings account and yanked all that money. We have another video about that, but um, it wasn't that was saving the organization. I think what really makes the organization work is the fact that they have become a real estate company, and a tax-free one too, which is an extra amount of percentage. You know, if you're selling properties and you're flipping properties, you still got to pay income tax. But they are a counted as a charity because they're associated with
Right.
a religious organization, so they're tax-free, and they are. I think. I guess my point here is that the organization sees very little value in the money that's written in every month as far as donations from individual publishers. A few bucks a month per publisher on average. Lots of publishers are terrible about it, like I was. I was awful for donating.
Yeah.
But the real value is getting a workforce, a slave labor workforce that can remodel things and build properties for you to sell. That's where the real profit is. Not having to pay skilled laborers, not have the electrician, the plumber, and the framing contractor brothers that come in and they work for free. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit, and we'll get into these these things that the organization is doing here on the screen in a minute. But I think
Yeah.
that's
When
the
our
reason. That was a pivot they're doing there. They're like, we're not going to get the money back because we've been telling these guys not to get educated. They're all miserable and
right.
poor. Let's find another way to fleece the flock.
Yeah. In our last episode where we talked about the witnesses that had been kidnapped on their way to attend one of the assemblies, I was reading about that story on like Reddit. And the one commenter said, well, obviously they didn't know much about Jehovah's Witnesses if they were asking for a ransom because they're all dirt poor.
Exactly.
And it's accurate. But growing up,
Well,
I mean, I never felt like we were poor as a child because everybody, we were just, our lifestyle was so similar to
right.
everyone around us. Um, you didn't know that wasn't normal because it was normal to you. And I think back to about like the way I grew up. My dad is an extremely intelligent man, very smart. He's probably one of the most intelligent people that I know. For years, he was a tool and die maker, which requires very precision skills, precision mathematics, cutting, welding. Everything has to be just right, or the machine overall won't work. And he excelled in that. That's why he was a terrible math tutor when I was a kid, because his mind just naturally grasped a lot of like mathematic concepts that were more of a struggle for me. And looking back on that as an adult, a working adult, at the skill that he had, there is zero reason that we should have lived the way we did. Meaning that he had such skill, had the organization not put so much pressure, especially on household heads, to, you know, basically hinge their spirituality on their income, or that's how they made it feel, to just live humbly and just, scrape by. We're all just, struggling along till the end. They make you feel guilty if you, earn a nice paycheck. I feel like our whole lives, many witnesses' lives could be totally different without that extra like pressure from them.
Yeah, it's been difficult for him in retirement now. I know your brother takes care of him a lot, and you do as well. And I think it's rough because he was choosing to go to meetings and go out in service instead of working or taking contracts from companies as a skilled machinist that would have been profitable for him, and he could have been in a comfortable retirement,
Yeah, there was,
relaxed.
I'm not saying you should put the love of money over the love of the Lord, obviously,
I
but
am.
there was lots of times that positions were offered to him where maybe he would need to be like on call on the
Yeah. Yeah.
weekend. And he, he had meeting on Sunday, and he just wasn't willing to even even be on call.
Yeah.
And he just said, well, I just feel like, if it was from Jehovah, then it wouldn't interfere with my meeting schedule, or it
Right.
wouldn't interfere with my Saturday morning ministry schedule.
Right.
And as a kid, I remember asking him, well, I thought on call means like they only call you if it's an emergency. And he said, but still, it's a possibility. I could get called. So just anything in that realm that he even slightly thought, could interfere with this very full and very burdensome schedule that we had related to the organization was just an automatic no.
Right.
And that's crazy. That's crazy. And yeah, now he's, on the downhill side of 75. No retirement, no 401k, no real savings to speak of. And that's crazy. I mean, that's just, it's so unnecessary.
It's so unfair. It's so sad that that organization is created that kind of insecurity. And I know this is obviously, there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, my parents didn't have those struggles, or they weren't, there are lots of Jehovah's Witnesses that make very good livings. But the point is that based on what the Watchtower tells you should be doing, you shouldn't be.
Right. You are the exception, not the rule.
Or even if you aren't the exception, you're the rebel that is doing the thing you're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I know our family went through times where, the little bit of, food stamps here, a little food stamps there. But then there were other times, unfortunately, after I moved out, maybe I was jinxing that up, but that they were doing much better and had some things sorted out. But honestly, if you are of the mindset of, I need to make sure that I have my retirement sorted, which is responsible. I need to make sure that I make enough money to save for that future. It is definitely looked upon like, well, you're not trusting in Jehovah enough. And that's a spiritual weakness to be relying on material things.
Absolutely. The scripture about storing up treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust consume, that is piped into your brain from the moment you can pay attention at meetings until you join the workforce.
100%.
So it's like you're programmed that, even if I'm struggling to pay my bills, that just shows that I have full reliance on Jehovah.
Somehow seems like a virtue to be poor.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to just take a little minute to share my personal, we believe differently on a lot of things, but I'm going to take just a minute to share my personal beliefs on this subject based on my faith now. So yeah, we grew up just super, super simplistic. We always had food, we always had shelter, but there were times when both of those were a struggle. As an adult, after I left the organization, I was with some friends, visiting one of their churches. And the pastor was talking about how when we pray, do we act like God doesn't already know us? And what he was saying was, he said, if your child came to you, your physical fleshly child, and they were starving, and they said, Mom, Dad, I'm starving. I'm in trouble. I need something to eat. Would you give them a crust of bread, or would you make sure they were full? Would you make sure they had all their needs met? And he said, of course, you would give them, all that they needed and more. You would make sure that they weren't in that position again if you could. He said, so when we go to God and we're praying, if you're going to ask him for something, ask for it all. And to me, to how I was raised, that was almost like blasphemous. I thought, oh my God, what does he mean? Ask for it all? That just seems so offensive. But he was saying, if you have the relationship with God, if you truly view him in a relationship way, as your heavenly father and a fatherly figure, a provider, you're not fearful to ask for it all. You don't have to pray, you know, let my kids eat tomorrow. You can pray, help me find the job that pays all the bills, that lets us take a vacation, that eases that mental burden, that takes away that emotional stress from my kids going to school and knowing that, the house might not have lights or heat when they come back. Like, take all of it away. And it was just such a novel idea to me. It was like my mind was blown. But the more I got to know him in the capacity that I do now, I just understand more. He already knows your heart condition before you ask. So if you're asking for, the bare minimum cardboard box shelter, he already knows if your heart is secretly craving a mansion. But if you're asking for a mansion and he already knows that you're a humble person in your heart and you would be satisfied with a meager dwelling, he knows. So when the Bible says, like, go boldly, enter boldly into the throne room, that's the relationship they're talking about. If you are in relationship with him and you're going to ask for it all. Because in my opinion, if you're a son or daughter of the king, you are not made to beg. And that was just such an amazing, like, revelation that I had. And once I kind of like learned more about that, my life just totally, totally changed. And I started pursuing goals that I had never pursued before. I went back to school. I finished my degree. Um, and the pressure that I felt, like, from a financial standpoint, thinking that I wasn't as faithful if I made a good living, or that my spiritual priorities were out of whack, like, all that just died away. And I have 10 times the relationship that I thought I had when I was inside the organization, and my life's 100 times better now. The end.
It seems like the Jehovah's Witness version that they want of God that they want you to worship is a kind of, Dickensian. Everything's stripped down, and if you're anything beyond having food for that day, that's superfluous. You shouldn't be thinking about. You're greedy to
Yeah,
think about
you're greedy.
saving some money for retirement and for stability for your children and emotional and stability, so that everybody's not freaked out all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not his plan
Hmm.
for you to just scrape by,
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
in my
And this is a lot of what we do this podcast from two different perspectives for, is because I don't see that perspective, and I think that's interesting.
yeah.
Um, uh, the organization does demand such basic lifestyles from its members, and then they do some pretty messed up stuff. My friend Phil was kind enough to send me this link. I could not
Mm.
remember it to save my life. It's called ibsaproperty.com. Have you a gander? This is crazy. This right here is exactly what we were talking about, where the organization takes the money from that they save in labor, because they have free labor. They have slave labor come in, volunteers that think they're working for Jehovah, and they come in and they remodel, for instance, these apartments. We're looking at the Olsmeyer Buttermeyer apartments, Olswater, excuse me. So let's look at the Buttermere, I guess is what's called Buttermere Court apartments. We click on this, and these are apartments that
These
the
things
organization
are
has purchased and remodeled and made
swanky.
swanky. And you can go ahead and have a look at what some of these properties cost. Let's see here. Did I click on the wrong thing? Here we go. Properties for sale. Oh, it looks like the Buttermere one's the one they're available right now. Buttermere. Listen, I gotta stop saying it because I'm not saying it right. I gotta say it with a British accent, maybe get it right. You go to this first apartment. This is one of three apartments in the building, and it is £1,050,000. So I think about $1.4 million for an apartment that they have completely
Yeah.
made, and they emphasize it's a luxurious space. It's gorgeous. It's luxury. So they're making luxury apartments with volunteer, effectively slave labor of Jehovah's Witnesses, who they are telling to live simply and
Yeah.
spend as much time for the organization so that they can flip this property and make a bunch of money on it, and also not pay income tax on that money because they're a charity. They're a slave labor organization. They're a real estate company. And IBSA stands for International Bible
Yeah,
Students
they would
Association.
discourage that's what blew my mind when you sent me this link and you scrolled at the bottom of the pages,
Yeah.
or the first page there. It links the jw.org website, and I thought, what? And so then if you scroll down a little farther, and in the About Us section, it says the IBSA stands for International Bible Students Association, which is a registered charity acting on behalf of Jehovah's Witnesses in Britain and Ireland. Now, many, many, many years ago, before they adopted the name Jehovah's Witnesses, they were referred to as the Bible students. So I have heard that term before, but when I tell you, literally until today, I have never heard of an independent IBSA registered charity that manages real estate.
Right.
I
Right.
never heard of it until
And this is
right
not
now.
an isolated thing. This is something that's happening in the UK. This is something they've done in the US, but they've done it under different format. Like all those properties in Brooklyn that they sold off over the last 10 years, and made many hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars off this property. Those were
Oh,
all
yeah.
remodeled by volunteers. So it was free labor. Labor is such a massive part. In fact, it's the majority of the expense of building a property. Them sticks in the wall ain't that
Good.
expensive. It's the contractors that are in there building the home to code, and making, in this case, making it luxurious. And I'm looking over here at my other screen here with all these up on the screen. It's the same thing they did in Brooklyn, and it's the same
Yeah.
thing that they're doing in London. They're doing these things to be profitable. They are a real estate company, and they're doing all this while looking their members right in the eye and saying, just rely on Jehovah. Don't work that extra shift.
Live
We
simply.
know that your rent is due soon and you're $300 short. God will provide, and then do nothing.
Yeah, it's funny to me that they flip these massive luxury dwellings, but then they would discourage their members from pursuing the type of career goals that would enable them to live in any of these properties.
Right. And by the way, to be clear, I'm saying that the governing body is saying that their Jehovah God will provide. That was not a dig on what you said. But
No.
it is, that's what they're saying. They're saying that their
Yeah.
organization can make all this cash, and you can just live poor. That's fine.
Well, a few weeks back when our friend Mike was on the show, I mean, he basically outlined how the world headquarters works. It's thousands of volunteers that work 6.5 days a week for nothing. I mean, basically nothing. So yeah, I mean, you think of what you could do with that kind of free workforce. You could do anything, whether it was construction or printing and all the other things that they've got their fingers in. It's no wonder they're raking it in.
Absolutely. It's absolutely despicable. And let me reset a little bit here. What other items do we have on this one here? I want to make sure I'm not missing something.
Well, that was really the gist of it.
Just that something else.
2,000 years later.
And the third thing, the third reason that comes to mind when I think of, why so many witnesses, are living subpar financial lives. I hate to use the word poor because that makes it sound like a dirty word, and I don't like that. But living simplistically, I'll say it like that. Is
well, even just maybe living in a stressful state.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's horrible. I know we've both lived in this, and I lived a good deal of my adult life in overdraft hell, and terrified that the water was, or the electric was going to
Yeah.
get cut off, and just struggling. And a great deal of that had to do with, I couldn't go relax on the weekend, and I had to give as much time as possible. Instead of working on my business, I had to give all of it, that time, to the organization. So, and driving around in service, like
Oh,
$400 worth
yeah.
of gas a month, it wasn't great when you're making next to nothing already. But anyway, continue.
No,
Sorry.
you're right on the money. That basically is what the third point was going to be. Your time is so consumed with organizational activities. There's no time to work extra or, you know, pursue your education or pick up an extra shift or, you know, reinvest in your business. It's every moment of every day is the organization promoting it, talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
ministry, volunteer service, endless volunteer service. It just really ties up all your available hours.
Right.
So then when you compound that with the guilt that you have if you do, you know, try to save a little or put a little away, it leads to almost like a feeling of hopelessness. And again, that makes you more reliant on the organization. You feel like, well, this system of things is hopeless. You can never get ahead. So we're going to just, you know, struggle on until the new system. And that's just flawed thinking.
There are so many people who had that thinking. And then if you recall, I believe it was about 10 years ago, I know one particular couple that were in their late 40s, early 50s when they signed up for Bethel service. They went to Bethel, and they were doing contracting work for Bethel. The wife was working, she had some management experience with a contracting company. She's working in an office. Husband was in the masonry department. He's out there laying bricks and running a crew. Something that easily they would have collectively been making $200,000 a year for, from each of them working those jobs easily. But they sold their house, simplified everything, moved to Bethel, did all that work. When the job was done, Bethel said, great, we're reassigning you to the local congregation. And then they're back at the local congregation. They don't have the savings they used to because they've used up a lot of it. They have some because they sold their house, but now they're rolling up on 60. And is the organization providing them a retirement for the hundreds of thousands of dollars they saved them? No, they're not. They're going to be flipping those properties and making that money. And it's such abusive treatment. And there's so many people who, particularly in that wave that happened about 10 years ago, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, a lot of people got sent home from Bethel when they weren't building as much. And when they were shifting into the new building project. So they sent all these people home from New York. And then when they shifted out to the new project in upstate, then they got a whole new set of younger people, younger contractors that are coming in to do those jobs and build those buildings. And it saves them having to take care of the old generation. And then they have a new, fresh generation that is unsuspecting. Lands them in the same financial hot water.
Yeah, my mom, she said that when she was growing up, her mother told her, well, the end of the world's going to come before you start school. And then the end of the world's going to come before you're in high school. And the end of the world's going to come before you get married. And of course, she said, I kind of felt nervous because all these milestones that my mom swore wouldn't come and go before the Great Tribulation were coming and going. But she acted like she didn't want to express that concern because then it would seem like she, lacked faith or she wasn't waiting on Jehovah or, somehow it was like a deficit in her character. But again, they gave their whole lives to the organization. And when they were elderly, they had nothing to show for it.
Absolutely. I want to share one last thing before we go. I noticed that recently there was a new letter that went out to elders that advised them to advise all congregations to stop looking at the Google review of the Kingdom Hall.
Real.
Your local Kingdom Hall has Google reviews, and they don't like that. They said, well, what you should do is instead of sending people that you're talking to in the field ministry there, you should send them to the jw.org to find out where it is. Don't look on Google Maps to find out where the Kingdom Hall is. Look for the address on, I don't know how you're supposed to do it, but the whole thing was look for the address of the local congregation on the JW website and then navigate your way from there. Because if you look at Google or at Apple Maps, you're going to see a review, and you're going to see a lot of reviews. Because if they're not abusive and they're respectful, but they're a genuine analysis of what happened to somebody there, they leave it up. So I would like to encourage everybody to leave a review for your local Kingdom Hall that you actually attended. It has to be an honest review, not abusive, not foul,
Right.
no bad language, nothing to get it blocked off. A genuine, honest
Realistic.
review.
Yeah.
And my honest review of my local Kingdom Hall, I'll put it up here, was that they wasted a lot of my time, and that I'm much happier and just a much happier person outside of this organization. And if you would like to be happier as well, steer clear of this here Kingdom Hall. So that's my recommendation. Again, nothing abusive, no accusations, no individuals. Those things, all Google will take them down anyway. And also, they're not appropriate. But give your actual review of a local Kingdom Hall. And because no matter how many letters the organization sends out to elders to tell people, don't look at Google, that's the first thing everybody looks
What are
at.
they going to do?
So,
Ask Jeeves?
Alta Vista, what do you say?
Get on your yellow pages. Look it up.
Let your fingers do the walking. Nope. All right, buddy.
Oh, we're going to have to
Go.
trim what I'm about to say. I do know what we were going to say when you said, like, I feel like there's something else. At least I think this is what you're thinking of. Earlier, you said, I think it's important to mention that by today's standards, not all, but so many people in the Bible that God favored were like filthy rich. King Solomon, is that what you were?
Abraham had many flocks and lots of things. Job was super rich.
Yeah, a
lot, yes. So many people that were tight with God had lots of money. So he doesn't have a problem with you having a little bit of money set aside. It's the organization does, because they want that money or they want that time, which is money.
Yeah.
Good call, buddy. You nailed it. I was going to wake up tonight and go, crap, what was it? Oh, no, it was that. It's okay to be prosperous. That's not a bad thing.